stabilized. In Pennsylvania, the absurdity of what we are doing is we have got some of the best schools in the United States, and it is so expensive for tax purposes to live here that the children that were educated at our expense have to leave the state to get jobs. We are 49th out of 50 states in job creation from age 21 to 31. Dana Corporation, gone. Bethlehem Steel Corporation, gone. Rugen Steel, gone. United States Steel, a mere fraction of what it was. Allegheny Leatherman, gone. Penn Central, gone. What else do we need to do? Reading, Pennsylvania used to be a powerhouse in the United States. It is no longer. And it had nothing to do with the citizens of Reading, Pennsylvania. It had to do with the government that is not helping us get to where we need to be. When you look at what's occurring, the Federal Reserve is completely powerless to raise interest rates. There are negative interest rates in 27 nations around the world. Think about that. In Germany, if you lend the German government money for 5 years, you have to pay them to do it. That would almost be something like Caitlyn Jenner getting Woman of the Year. I'm sorry, that didn't happen, did it? Yeah, listen, that doesn't tell you the problem we have. We're nothing, right? And so as you start to take a look at these issues, it's not going to get better. So here's what's going to happen in Pennsylvania. Individuals will start to lose their homes first. And by the way, it is already happening. I mean, I do a lot of work where we help people that try to get around it. In some cases, there's nothing we can do. You're seeing people who are in their 70s going back to work because they need to try to do something, either get medication or to pay their property taxes, or whatever the case may be. The idea of the family farm is diminishing rapidly. People are selling it for real estate value. That's not what this area has been about for centuries. Pennsylvania built the United States. This area in particular was the hotbed of the American Revolution. And from the way it was going tonight, I think you are again, by the way, that's another thing. But what happens is that's a fighting spirit we need. But what will happen is there will become a point in time in which people say, I've had enough of watching my neighbors suffer. And I walked across the United States. It was a walk of atonement and gratitude at first. And I said, anybody that I've ever hurt in my life, I asked that they would forgive me, because I'm a sinner. I asked anyone that I've ever disappointed that they would pray for me, any person I've ever helped, that they would help another. And I did as a walk of gratitude because I came from an incredibly poor family. My dad died when I was 3. We had a family of 5. My sister was 6 months old when my dad died. My mother never was able to, at any point in time while she was alive, ever able to say comfortably that she could make the next month's either rent payment or mortgage payment. And she worked hard. She kept the family together. But then I saw what happens to some families that have been torn apart because of tax policy, because of government actions, because of all sorts of other things. And I realized I came from the wealthiest family in the United States. We just didn't have any money. I never doubted for a second that my mom loved me. And I say that to you because the people in this room, we have to do, if you look at what we need to do, we need to stick together. We need to listen to what Senator Wagner said. He told you the truth tonight. He did. I mean, I'm going to make a comment to you because hearing it and believing it and accepting it are all different issues. Just because we hear it doesn't mean we have to accept it. But I'll give you an example. When you hear the comment that it's constitutional that someone has said that these benefits are owed, Senator Wagner's right. You'll hear that. That means you've got to get a judge that's willing to overturn some of those issues. If you fail to overturn that, the state will go bankrupt. It's a given. It's a given. I can tell you that for a fact. So let me tell you what's going to happen after Puerto Rico. Chicago's going to be going bankrupt next. When Chicago goes bankrupt, because the Supreme Court in Illinois said to Mayor Rahm Emanuel, whether you like it or not, he negotiated with all the unions to structure back the cost, and then one union filed a complaint about it and won in the Illinois Supreme Court. He had to make a $500 million pension contribution, and when that happened, the game was over. They're going bankrupt. When that happens, that will be the start of the tipping point in which someone says, we have to fix this. So let me give you an example. I came out of the steel industry. I used to work at Lucas Steel, and then shortly after I left, I went to a foundry operation in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and they went from Hanover, Pennsylvania to some other things in manufacturing. I've done that most of my life. But then what happened was, as you look at it, Bethlehem Steel went bankrupt. When that happened, there had been 15 steel companies that went bankrupt before Bethlehem Steel. But when that one happened, everyone went, this is for real. That's what's going to happen now. Detroit filed bankruptcy, and I've got to be honest with you, I thought that was going to be the one in which people said, this is going to happen, this is for real. And it didn't happen. I thought General Motors bankruptcy would wake people up, but we had a president who decided to bail it out, so we didn't feel the real effects of it. So we have the distinct pleasure of paying for that bankruptcy, each and every one of us here. And candidly, our children and grandchildren, with the $19 trillion of debt that we've built up, that is not sustainable. When you look at what happens when Chicago goes bankrupt, that will be so big it will take down Illinois. Illinois' insolvency will cause everyone to do it, and it is too big to be bailed out. One other thing that you need to be aware of that's going to happen in Pennsylvania, and the Auditor General, Gene DePasquale, he's really trying to do a great job of getting this municipal pension obligation raised to everybody's, and he's a Democrat, but I tell you what, he's working very diligently to try to make this happen. But I'm going to meet with him in about 2.5 weeks to tell him that Pennsylvania is using an actuarial earnings rate that's 150 or 1.5% higher than any commercial plan is allowed to use. And the actual liability in Pennsylvania is $40 billion understated, and it cannot possibly be paid. So let me give you an example. Stock market had a hell of a week this week, didn't it? Right? Anybody who's getting a defined benefit pension plan had nothing happen to them. It did happen to you. So if you have a small retirement savings, you've been having the benefit of getting no earnings on it from your bank for 10 years now. So you've been paying the dividend for the General Motors and other organizations' bailouts. You've been paying. I've been paying. It's an unseen tax. On top of that, while you're seeing that, you see the 401k or the IRA or whatever savings any one of you might have had, you're seeing things start to go down. You're seeing property values in Pennsylvania go down. Look at the appraised value of your property compared to when you could sell it for, and I know because I just tried to downsize, and my property was appraised at $40,000 more than the highest offer we got. And we just had it reappraised a year ago, and here was the response I got from the county. Property values statewide, for a larger part, are coming down because our property taxes are going up. In Lebanon County, property taxes just went up 40% for the county. And in my borough, they went up 80%. When you start looking at that, you tack on that, the state tax portion of it, and what Obama would like to do, and all of a sudden you've got people who can't possibly survive. This is not sustainable. So here's what you're going to see. Oil prices are going to stay down. There's going to be significant unemployment in all the oil-producing states. Governor Wolf can put a 500% extraction tax. There'll be no oil extracted in Pennsylvania. The drilling will stop. It will just, the currently operating wells will continue, but the other wells will just completely stop. Because once you cadre an oil facility, you might as well shut it down because it's too expensive to reopen. Delta Airlines saw that when they had to reopen the Tenneco plant. It's incredibly expensive to do that whenever you shut down a plant. The second thing that happens, you'll see some municipalities be unable to make it. Pittsburgh almost went bankrupt about 10 years ago. You'll see more of that. Obviously, you saw what happened with Harrisburg. You'll see Puerto Rico apply for and receive permission to go into bankruptcy. And they think that what they're going to do is they're going to have all the suppliers say that you're going to take 20 cents on the dollar. But what you need to be aware of is bankruptcy court's designed to protect the creditor and not the debtor. So those creditors can tell Puerto Rico to go pound sand. That's exactly what happened in Harrisburg when they tried to do the same thing. And so the governor of Puerto Rico is about to get a lesson in reality, as Senator Wagner said. You need to listen to him. Because what Senator Wagner is, he's trying to fight a battle in this thing against an entrenched system that when you go into combat, you might need to use napalm or tactical nuclear weapons to extract the enemy, but they're about ready to shoot themselves. They just aren't smart enough to know it. What I fear for, and I know Senator Wagner does as well, is the collateral damages for people sitting here and our neighbors, and that's morally unconscionable. Oil is going to stay at about $30 a barrel because we were brilliant enough to give our enemy $150 billion. And it's actually closer to $100 billion, but who counts over $100 billion unless you're playing the lottery? When you start to examine what that happens is we, in essence, paid Iran and opened oil markets back to Iran at a time when there's already an oil glut, further punishing all U.S. oil producers. Let me translate. Our employees and their jobs. That's who's really punished. So when you start to examine those issues, it's a real challenge. The next thing's going to happen, Chicago's going to go down the tubes. When that happens, there'll be a significant wake-up call, and then what Senator Wagner told you, people will then come back and say, okay, we've got to go to the negotiating table, SEIU, PSEA. I do believe that they'll eventually come to the negotiating table and say, rather than watch this implode and go to zero, what are we going to do to help fix this? I would love to take any questions you might have. I'd love to find out any thoughts you have, any concerns you might have. Stock market is usually a question I get about this point in time. Expect another anywhere from 10 to 15% correction. I will caution you, if you've already lost money, don't panic. If the worst thing you can do in something like this, it's called the VIX index, which is a volatility measure. The worst thing you can do is panic in something like this. It really is. Stay the course, stay your strategy, try to stay out of debt, which is what I mentioned to you the last time I was here. Then the latest thing I want to mention, I just had an op-ed piece that was published, which you have, as my daughter said, Dad, you have to be a real loser to write about something like that. That's why I love you too, sweetheart. But it's called Velocity of Money. The velocity of money is how quickly money turns in an economy in a year. It is the lowest it has ever been in recorded history. That is the most dangerous economic phenomenon. So President Obama, Governor Wolf, and all those other people don't realize it, that Senator Wagner's won. They just don't know yet that they've lost. And what we need to make sure of is that we all bind together. Stay close to your churches, stay close to your neighbors, stay close to your friends, be willing to help one another. And I can tell you, from having walked 148 days, the people in this nation are more than willing to help a complete stranger. If they're willing to help a complete stranger, I'm positive we're going to help our neighbors. You guys have been great. I'd love to take any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Sure. Yes, sir. Oil went to $26 a barrel. That's correct. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I have the microphone. I'll bring the microphone to you. Hold on.
Carvine, do you really think that there would be ever a chance for the dollar not to be the international currency?
I do. The question is, will the dollar ever not be a world currency? The answer is unequivocally. It's already started. The renminbi, which is the Chinese currency, has already been approved to be a co-equal world currency with the U.S. dollar.
Can you explain what will happen the day after the dollar no longer ceases to be the international currency?
What will happen is the inflation rate, the cost of goods inside the United States will immediately go up by about 5 to 6%. Your transaction costs for all of our imports, which are fairly significant, will have to pay a transaction fee to convert it back into U.S. dollars, which will be about 1 to 2% of the transaction cost. So you'll feel it in the pocketbook, you'll see it in your wallets, but you won't see it in your paycheck. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you establish the best thing you can do, the best thing anybody can do, is to stay out of debt. That's number one. And the reason being is, I believe we're going to go into a deflationary spiral. Deflation means is that wages and prices will start coming down. We've already seen it because real disposable income has been going down. Meaning while your pay might be getting a little bit higher, with what you're paying for medical insurance, the net amount of money you have to spend is going down. All right, so once that happens, then you'll see that the debt is more expensive to repay. Kids who have graduated from college with $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 in student loans are finding that out right now. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, they might have graduated and gotten a job paying $35,000. Now they're graduating and getting a job paying $28,000. And so it's a fairly significant, so stay at that. The second issue is, unless you have a lot of money, don't try to play a currency game, that no one wins that. It's like trying to guess interest rates or whether or not my mother-in-law is coming to visit. They're both impossible to determine. So stay at it, that's the biggest issue. And then I would keep reserves of cash, to be candid with you, and make sure that you are self-sufficient. And this sounds silly, but if you were able to help keep your health up, you're better off to be able to do that. Being able to be physically able to move, and not that you don't need to worry about running anywhere, but what it means is that you need to be able to have some degree of mobility, because medical expenses are the one things that I'm seeing that are crippling most people our age. Does that help answer your question? Gold and silver, I would say if gold went down another to the 950 range to 900, I'd start buying a little bit. Be very careful about bulk buys of anything. And what I mean by that is, say if you had $5,000, you say, okay, I think it's as low as it's going to be, and jump in. I would buy a little bit at a time. Silver, if silver got down below 12, I would start buying again. And you're going to see that in a deflationary environment, you're going to see prices come down. And you've already seen it. I mean, commodity prices have plummeted. I mean, they really have. I mean, steel, as an example, is already 70% below where it was just 2 years ago. Oil, obviously, is down 70%. So you want to be careful. And there's a concept, a very important concept that's boring as all get out. It's called relative value. What relative value means is, say if I have a dollar of silver coin, and that dollar of silver coin might be worth, say, $12 in melt value. If the product, the grocery that I want to buy is, say, a box of cereal, and it's $12. If that cereal box container goes up to 14 and the silver goes up to 15, I'm actually $1 better off than I was. Does that make sense? And I apologize if that sounds confusing, but I think what you'll find is called relative value. You're going to see that's where gold and silver, even if they came down, the other stuff will come down more.
Okay, we got time for 2 more questions, so.
If oil is, I didn't realize there was this many people involved in looking for oil, okay? But how could one industry, when every other industry in the world, every other industry in the country is paying us for fuel, right? So they should have to be a better bottom line because they're not spending much on fuel. But how could it, just the price of oil with this much economic havoc, because every other company ought to be doing better because they don't have a reputation.
That's one of the most brilliant questions I've ever been asked, and let me answer it this way. At the same time that the oil is coming down, health insurance costs and workers' comp costs for employers is skyrocketing. And so as a result, whatever benefit people are getting, I used to have an interest in a waste disposal business up in the Northeast, and fuel was a major cost of our component, but so is workers' comp. And workers' comp for truck drivers is one of the highest, Pennsylvania's got one of the highest workers' comp rate for truck drivers, and in the waste oil industry, it's a big number. And as Senator Wagner said, the fraud cases, and the sad part about the fraud cases, it detracts from the people who really got injured. And it really does. It makes it harder for people who are really injured to get help. So let me give you an example. How many of you are paying significantly more for your health insurance than you were 3 years ago? Did it more than offset the benefit from the lower price for oil? See what I mean? In other words, the oil prices, while they went down, they didn't go down enough to cover your losses. So that's why the companies are not doing better off. So while the oil prices have come down, the ones who are, by the way, the airlines, 1/3 of an airline's cost are fuel. So if their prices have been coming way down, then what would happen is they're seeing a profitability. That's why you're seeing their stock prices go up. But that's by far and large the rare exception.
What I'm saying is General Motors loses money this quarter, right? That doesn't pull the whole stock market down, everybody else down. Oil is that big, there's that many people that this one industry is having a problem with it. Every other industry in the world goes down.
Well, but there's...
GM has, Walmart has more employees than oil.
Would you, let me give you an example.
So why would one industry lose money, make everybody, the whole stock market, the whole world economy down?
Okay, well, let me explain it this way, because it's important. You've got to be careful not to only look at oil, because it's not happening just one thing at a time. At the same time oil is going on, it's being offset, as I mentioned to you, by the medical expense. But it's